Specifically, how are you related to the victim?
Trevor's my son.
And you previously sent me some photos, so you'd be able to identify them?
Yes.
I'm showing to the defense the photos. May I approach yours? Handing the witness the photos. I know it's going to be hard, but are the first two of those photos the ones you sent me?
Yes, sir.
Can you identify the people in the first photo?
Yes, sir. States Exhibit 13 is my son and I. My son Trevor and I at his enlistment into the Army.
And the second photo?
It's my son. Exhibit 14. He's his love of fishing.
Can you identify the third photo I put up there for you?
Yes, sir. Exhibit 15.
Yeah, I will just object on the third photo for now. I don't think it's appropriate for this witness to testify, but if we can.
Can you identify the photo?
Yes.
15? Or
Yeah.
14?
14 is my son fishing, Trevor.
That's right. And the 15.
15 is my son. Looks like an autopsy photo. Yes.
I'd like to offer an evidence.
Any objections other than the ones you will give?
No further objection.
Limited. The publishing one.
Let the publish on. James, you said that was a picture of you and your son.
Yes, that was the day he enlisted in the Army. Obviously, it was a special day, but that flag there was my grandfather's flag over his funeral, so it was there for a couple of my enlistments when I re-enlisted in the military, and I thought it'd be perfect for him to give the oath of office over his great grandfather's flag. But that was the day he did his oath.
You said you enlisted,
Yes, sir.
and you talked a little bit about 14 as well.
Mhm.
Your son liked to fish, you said?
If there was water around it, he would fish it. Yes, and that was his passion. If there's one thing he really loved, it was fishing.
And once again, publish. Is this a picture of your son after
Yes.
he was killed?
Yes.
bit about your son, where he was living. Obviously, on the event of the day, you were physically there as well, right? On December 25th, 2021.
Yes, sir.
You went over to your son's apartment. Who else was with it?
You said who else was
Yeah,
it?
who else lived with Trevor?
His girlfriend Madison and his uncle Howard, which is his uncle's a little over a year older than him, so they're more friends than uncle. But yeah, so Howard and Trevor and Madison share the apartment.
Howard's your brother?
Sorry?
Howard is your brother?
He's my brother-in-law. He's my wife's brother.
And how long have they been living together?
I don't recall. I would maybe under a year, because Howard was here attending UTSA, getting his graduate degree. So while he was doing that, maybe around a year. That's kind of my best guess.
But your family was really close, right?
Extremely close, yes.
You guys would always meet up as much as possible.
Right, every holiday, occasional cookouts and whatnot, but yes.
And Trevor was very close with his uncle.
Uncle Howard?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
They are only a year apart, you said. Are they almost like siblings? We have pictures of them growing up from, little tiny kids, always hanging out. They were extremely close. We're going to talk about meeting up to it. Did you ever meet the defendant?
I did.
How did that come about?
We had a get together at the house, and we were doing some landscaping, and I had Trevor and Howie come out. I would always float them a couple bucks if they wanted to help out, and he had mentioned the defendant was willing to help her. He invited him out as well. So I don't know the exact time of that.
But you had him out at your place?
Correct. He was at our house. And
Where do you live?
out in New Braunfels.
In the Braunfels area.
Yes, sir.
Were you able to talk to him at all while they were doing the job? Did you have him working for you?
No, because everything was done, because he arrived afterwards, so everything was pretty much done. But I think since maybe he was already on his way, because it's a good probably 4 on the grill and cooked out.
Do you remember any conversations with him other than just a simple introduction?
Just everyday talk, where are you from? Nothing out of the ordinary that I recall.
But you'd be able to identify him.
Yes,
Do you see him in the courtroom?
yes, sir.
Would you point to him and identify him by an article of clothing that he's wearing?
Yes, sir. Right there, wearing a gray suit, blue tie, maybe a pink shirt.
Let the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant, his gray suit.
We'll still go, yeah, that double thing.
So in December, what was your family's Christmas plans?
Trevor wanted to host it at his apartment. It's always at our house, just because it's bigger and more room. But that particular year, he wanted to host it, kind of show off his apartment. And so we were definitely for it.
Okay. And who was all included in this plan that was going to go over to the apartment?
Sure, yes, sir. There was myself, my daughter, my wife, my sister-in-law, her husband, and their daughter. That's who was coming down.
At the time, how old was your daughter?
My daughter at the time was probably a sophomore in college, so 21, maybe 2021.
And you said your sister-in-law and mother-in-law?
Correct.
How old was their daughter?
She at the time, years ago, five maybe, about 5. A bunch of gifts, and to go up and just eat, play games, open gifts. Every tradition, every year I buy $100 in dollar scratchies, so we kind of play games every year and to see who gets the most lotto tickets, to see if anybody hits big on it. So that's kind of our tradition, but that would have been the extent of it.
It's kind of a chill Christmas,
Yes, sir.
celebrating together.
As every Christmas is. It would have been no different. It was just at Trevor's place.
When did you all arrive at Trevor's place?
If I recall, I want to say around maybe 9 a.m., a little after. We weren't in a super big hurry to get down there, so it was mid-morning-ish.
And when you arrived, what was the first thing you guys did?
Walked over to figure out where his apartment was, because we weren't exactly sure, because none of us had never been there before.
Okay.
And then just basically walked around the complex until we could find out where his actual apartment was.
Once you found it, what did you get? Load all the gifts into the house?
Well, there was quite a bit, because we had a lot of presents. As we were unloading my car, my sister-in-law and her husband, they pulled up next to us. So there was, if I recall, there was maybe 3 to 4 trips in and out. We probably went in and out of the door over 40 times, because we had food, hot food, that you can only take one of. And there was the 6 of us that were going in and out, and then Howie helped us carry all the items as well. So it probably took.
And after you got that 15 minutes of loading all the stuff in, what did you guys do?
Started making some coffee, eating, and getting ready to open gifts.
Okay. Did you guys actually get to open gifts?
We did. Yes, sir. We opened opened them for a little bit, and then that's when we decided to play some games for some lotto tickets.
And did you play the games at that point?
No, never got to that. No, sir.
Okay. At that part, what happened?
So after we were opening gifts, we decided to play games. We're going to clean up a little bit. My sister-in-law and her husband were going to take some of the open gifts down to their car. And then that time, Trevor decided that he wanted to take his dog out to the bathroom.
Okay. What was Trevor wearing?
I remember him wearing, I want to say it was sweatpants, and then for a shirt, it was a shirt, one of my old t-shirts. It was like a dry fit, real thin, like tight fitting t-shirt type thing.
Did he happen to change when you guys showed up, or was that the stuff he was wearing when he woke up?
That's what he was wearing the whole time. Just sweatpants and a t-shirt.
Was he wearing anything on his feet?
On his what?
His feet.
His feet.
Yeah.
I don't know if he had slides on. I don't, because he was a kind of he always wore slides a lot. I don't think he had shoes on. I think he was barefoot in his slides, but I don't quite recall.
All right. But you said he was going to take the dog out to do the dog's business, I assume.
Yes, sir.
What did you do at this time?
So like I said, my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, they walked out the door, and Trevor followed out after them. And then I was probably about maybe 10 paces behind Trevor because I knew he was going to go out by himself, and that's our time to, you know, kind of catch up. I can hang out with him for a few minutes.
Okay.
And
Do you recall what the entryway looked like?
his entryway,
Yeah.
I do.
Could you explain it for us?
Sure. So if you're coming into his home, it's the door opens and swings to the left, which there was an entrance there to go back to the bedroom and a bathroom, and it basically opens up to a wide living room. And then immediately to the right, you know, it's kind of like an L-shaped. There's like a little breakfast nook dining area, and then in the back of that, it's kind of an elongated kitchen. And then as you walk through his door at the 1 o'clock position, you could look into his bedroom. So you can kind of see a majority of the apartment as you first enter the apartment.
And his apartment was on which floor is his apartment on?
Second floor.
Second floor. And how were the stairs situated going up to his apartment?
So they favored his side. When you go up the steps, immediately to the top of the steps, if you take maybe a step to the left, would be his door. And if you go to the right and then walk down a common patio, would be the defendant's door, and the doors face one another.
To the neighbors?
Yes.
And if you saw a sketch of this, would that help you kind of describe how the events went forward?
Yeah, I sure. I don't think I mean, it's ingrained in my head, the layout of his apartment and the steps and whatnot. But if it's easier for everybody else, that's fine.
I'm showing what is marked as C 016 to the May I approach?
Yes.
I'm handing what's been marked as Exhibit 16 to the witness.
Yeah, just let me get my orientation of it here. Okay. Yeah, so it's a view as if I'm standing at the bottom of the steps looking up, showing Trevor's apartment immediately to the left at the top of the steps, and then the defendant's would be farther to the right as you go up the steps and round the railing. And yes.
May we offer State Exhibit 16?
No objection.
Okay. Submitted. You may close.
Offer to publish? James, this is the exhibit that we showed you and offered as evidence. Kind of the entryway. Would you be able to explain to the jury kind of the orientation of this setup of stairs in apartments?
Yes, slightly below the circled letter C, that would represent the bottom of the steps. And then going up that long rectangle would be the steps. And then at the top where it says second floor landing, Trevor's apartment door would be immediately to the left, and then the defendant's would be to the right. I don't know, maybe 10 feet or so, maybe.
And you said that your son's was on the left, looking at this right now.
Correct. Number 3.
Where would the doorway be explained in that sketch?
So the doorway would be, so apartment 324, and the doorway would be right there to the left of the number 2 on second floor. That would swing into the left.
So, is this the area that the door would be for your son?
That's correct.
So these brackets would show the doorways,
Probably the door frame or something.
and that's where it was oriented.
Yes,
And then the defendants would be oriented directly across.
correct. Because they seem like a mirror door of one another.
Windows directly in front. Would you say would you say what this would represent?
Yeah, that would be Trevor's window in his little dinette area.
All right, and then these windows on this side.
You know, I don't recall there being windows. I don't recall windows on that side.
But these here are the stairs, correct?
Yes, sir.
And then a short landing in between the two.
Yes, sir.
You said that you followed your son out a few paces behind him.
Yes, sir.
How far behind do you think you were in relation to the stairs?
So he was probably just starting down the steps
When you started coming out?
when I started coming out, you know, because I could see him walking because of the open concept of his apartment. So I just kind of walked at that 45, like I was coming out of his bedroom, you know, straight to the door to follow him out.
Okay. And when you got out of the apartment, how far ahead of him? How
Well,
far ahead was your son?
Yeah, so he was ahead of me the whole time.
Okay.
You know, I would say half of the stair length, maybe, but
So he was
70
one half
paces.
ahead of where you were walking, both of you going down.
Sure, I started coming out as he was headed down, and then when I started down the steps, I would say he was probably about halfway, maybe a little more than halfway, because he never stopped. He just kept, despite the yelling, he just never stopped. He just kept walking down the steps.
Okay. So now at this point, when you're out there, what happened that was unusual for a Christmas morning?
Well, before I got out, well, as soon as Trevor stepped out, that's when I heard the screaming and yelling. And I originally thought, you know, it was maybe a joke or something, because that just seemed odd for somebody to start screaming and yelling like that.
Well, can you explain what you mean by like that?
Well, I mean, he's got a loud voice, or it seemed to be loud at that time, and all I heard was, you know, I effing hate you, you ruined my life, but over and over, just I effing hate you, is what I recall him yelling. And then,
Where were you at that time?
like, just before I walked out the door.
Okay.
So Trevor would have been toward the top of the steps.
All right. And then what happened?
I remember looking over and seeing the defendant. His face was just purple. I mean, he was obviously visibly upset. And that's when I knew it wasn't a joke. So we continued walking down the steps. Trevor eventually got to the bottom of the steps. And I was about halfway, and he transitioned. You know, first it was, you know, I effing hate you, you were in my life. And then it transitioned to, you know, what I felt his ill regard toward Madison. You know, I don't want to be your friend.
We'll get in that. We'll get
Okay.
into that. But you were halfway down the stairs when you think you transitioned from just insulting your son.
Correct.
Okay. And you said that Trevor was all the way to the bottom when it transitioned?
Correct.
Okay. And now let's get into the transition of the difference. When you got halfway down, what was that
It was the same tone, same yelling. It switched from yelling at Trevor, to him saying how he never wants to be friends with Madison, or I never want to be your friend again. I'll never trust you again. Just yelling, obviously for her to receive that message, or to him to receive that message of his feelings toward her. I don't know. He just transitioned to Madison.
And it's been a few years, right?
Served 3 years.
Could you relate to us all of the things that he said up to this point?
So there was a lot of I hate yous, a lot of I effing hate you. Then there was the transition to the Madison. Trevor was still at the bottom of the steps. He stayed down there, and then he focused his behavior toward me, not to yell at me like directly, like he had an ill feeling toward me. He just said, whenever you were robbed, your son robbed you. He said that a few times, and it struck me. I'm like, I've never been robbed before. And at that point is when, Trevor had enough, because he obviously had focused his attention on me. And I don't know if it was embarrassing for Trevor that somebody's yelling at his dad at his house or what. I don't know.
But let's talk about that, about your son.
Mm-hmm.
You said all the way down being yelled at, but when he directed it at you is when your son's behavior changed and he stopped continuing to go water the dog or whatever.
Right. So as soon as he focused it, his yelling at me that's when Trevor went up the steps.
Okay. Now your son's temperament. You're his father,
Yes.
Would you kind of describe a little bit about that?
Yeah, he's always a jokester, happy kid, but like anybody else, I imagine to a point, you're only going to take so much. I'll admit I was a little frustrated with it, but I could ignore it. I had no relationship with this man, and I could easily just slough it off. But
Okay.
I don't know if based on their history, if there's just a shorter temper with that. I don't know.
Okay. But your son has a temper?
I wouldn't say he's like a hot-headed temper guy. I wouldn't say that. Everybody has a temper.
All right. But you do think that the things the defendant was saying to you and to your son made your son go back up the stairs?
I think when he focuses attention to me, I think that's what.
Subject to speculation on that.
That's fine, sustained.
And Your Honor, may we have an instruction disregarding to the jury?
The juror disregard the last testimony.
Defense position for this trial to preserve the error.
It's denied.
Right. You told us how that the defendant made a transition to yelling at you, and then, in the sequence of events, your son started heading back up the stairs. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Alright. At that point, what happened?
So we walked up the steps, the railing to obviously.
So he passed you?
He did. Yeah, because I eventually made my way down to the bottom of the steps. So I was standing completely at the bottom of the stairway at this time because I had kept walking. Let me clarify that. So we passed each other on the steps, but I kept walking down the steps to the bottom. So I was physically standing at the bottom of the steps. And then he rounded the corner. I think that at that time the defendant probably figured he was coming to his door, and then the door slammed. And then, Trev walked up to the door, extended like he was going to knock, but his hand wasn't high. I didn't see like a knock. in the door.
Why didn't you see?
Well, there's a cross member on the railing, but I don't think I was too focused on his hand to see if he would knock or not.
What did Trevor do with the dog on his way up?
But
Okay.
I don't know what happened to the dog,
Okay, don't
unfortunately.
worry about it. You said you were standing, you made it to the
I was
bottom end?
on the sidewalk, right? I was completely off the stairs.
Just like 10, 14 steps down.
It would be to the right of the steps immediately, all up there, and then all the way to the right,
And all the way to the right.
and then it attaches to the house.
Okay, so your view of this event, you're standing around here, around the Cias?
No, I'm to the right at the bottom of the steps. I kind of have the railing in the center of
Okay,
it.
so you're standing right by the railing.
Yes, but on the sidewalk itself, yes, sir.
And so there's railing up,
Yes.
and you said there was a railing obstructing some of the view.
Right, so there's a top rail, a bottom rail, and then, if I recall, there's slats, metal slats,
Okay.
if I recall.
But you did say that your son said something. Oh. Would a picture help you, like an actual physical picture of it? May I approach the witness?
Yes.
I'm showing you what has been marked as State's Exhibit 17. What is that?
Yeah, so that's their porch, that's their doors facing each other.
Could you say that a little louder or repeat it?
Yeah, that's their doors facing each other.
Okay. I'm proffering to defense, review Exhibit 17.
No objection.
Okay, it's admitted to publish.
And then publish on.
Yes.
Publishing State's Exhibit 17. James, what is this?
It looks like their common porch.
Okay, and so, in relation to this, is this a fair and accurate depiction of their porch that day?
How I recall it, yes, sir.
Okay, and you would have been standing in relation to this, and so your son would have been thereby been where?
To the right, on the right-hand side, as he approached the defendants.
Is that what you're talking about, obstructions?
Yeah, I thought it was the railing itself, but yeah, I don't recall. It's weird. I just don't recall anything hanging on it from that day. You know.
Okay. Fine. So, getting back to the sequence of events, you're at the bottom, your son is close to the defendant's door, he raises his hand. And what happened then?
So I remember him leaning forward, like I said, like he was going to knock. I guess I didn't focus on exactly where his hand was, but then that's when the door opened. So I just made the assumption that he opened it.
So you told the officer on scene that your son opened the door?
Yeah, that was the assumption that I had because it pretty much opened at the time.
Okay.
I think you know, his hand would hit the door.
From that angle, could you see whether the door was cracked open or all the way open?
No, sir, I don't recall that.
So you thought that because of your son walking that way, he opened it?
That was my assumption, yes, sir.
At this point, what happened?
The door, I remember it opening a little bit it could open all the way from my point of view, actually, but I know the door opened, and then, because he was still a step away, so he took another step, you know, toward the door like he was gonna go inside.
Okay. And what did he say? What did your son say?
You know, I said something along the effect, like, you want smacked, or do you want, you want smacked, or talking smack, something of that effect, because it wasn't very loud. You know, I sensed that the defendant was right there next to him.
Well, Your Honor, I'm not gonna object to the speculation as far as what he could sense, because he can't see.
Okay, it's overruled.
Your son said something to the defendant.
Yes, sir.
And then, was it before or after the door opened, or while the door was opening?
I would say the door was probably open at that point. Yes.
And he took another step as if to go into the apartment.
Yes.
And what happened now?
So when he took the step, I imagine, you know, 5 to 10 seconds later is when I heard the 3 shots. I didn't realize, I thought they were fireworks at first, you know, because it was so loud I couldn't tell exactly where they were coming from. I knew they were coming from that area, and then Trevor dropped, like almost in a fetal position, straight down, and then went straight on his back.
So he immediately dropped.
Yes.
When he was still standing outside the door when he dropped,
Yes.
and so the body settled on this diagram, where would you say? He said fell into the fetal position. Would you be able to tell the jury where?
Right. So under that red thing is where he was probably standing, and then that's when he just kind of fell backwards from there.
And he fell backwards into the fetal
Well,
position?
right. So he went straight down and then kind of rolled backwards onto his back.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
You said you were in combat missions, correct?
Yes.
Have you ever seen anyone get shot before?
Yes.
And the people, were they shot and killed in front of you?
From a distance, yes.
Have you seen the way a dead body falls when a person's been killed?
Yeah, I suppose I have, yes.
Would you be able to explain to the jury the difference between movies and real life when people are shot and killed and how they fall?
Object to relevance.
It's overruled.
Can I answer that?
Yes.
I think the movies just kind of sexy it up, I guess you could say, to make it look dramatic and action, but in reality, you know, when the shots are, when they hit their intended shot, it's just not a good thing to see. You just drop.
But did the bullets send the bodies flying?
Not necessarily. I mean, you're talking high. I mean, if you have a high caliber bullet, you know, like a 50 cal or something like that, then sure.
But with lesser caliber bullets.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not going to make you jolt and run backwards or something. No, I mean, you're just going to absorb it.
And did your son go flying back when you were shot?
No, and matter of fact, I didn't know he was shot because he didn't move. That's why I was originally confused. And I didn't realize what it was until I seen him fall, and then I knew that they were gunshots at that time.
And that's when you knew the difference between fireworks and gunshots when your son fell.
Yes, sir.
At this point, what happened?
So once it quickly, set in what happened, you know, I remember getting in like a ready run position because I wanted to run up the steps. But I couldn't because the door was open, and there was no way I could run up the steps. So I was just standing there.
When you say the door was open, you're speaking of the defense door still?
Correct, yes, sir. And then there was 2 more shots. You know, when Trevor was laying on his back, you know, on the porch. A couple seconds later, there came 2 more shots.
Okay, so after the initial shots,
Mm-hmm.
your son's on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Shots while he's laying on the ground.
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, you go a little bit more into that. What did you observe, if anything, from the defense?
So at that point, I mean, it was shocking. So I think, you know, that's when you just process and things just start getting ingrained into your head. I remember, you know, seeing the beginning of the defendant, like his gun in the front of his body and the door in his doorway. As he fired the 2 shots, he kept running. What I recall, he stood over him and he just yelled because he was obviously furious. And at that point, I thought he was going to run in, you know, to my son's door because the door was open. It was propped open, and my entire family was in there at that point. And I remember thinking, can I run? Can I make it up to these steps in time? And I know I couldn't. So basically, I froze. And then, you know, the defendant, he just basically walked back in his apartment, shut his door. At that point, do you want me to continue, or
Let's go into that
Okay.
specific area. So you said he fired 2 more shots and was screaming at your son's body.
Yeah, it's just like not like FUs or what. He was just screaming.
Okay. And did he say anything to you?
No.
Okay. So at that point, he went back into his apartment and shut the door.
He did.
And what did you do?
At that point, I ran up the steps as fast as I could, and as I got to the top of the steps to round the steps to get to Trevor, then he had opened his door again.
So let's stop there. Just one more thing. Did the defendant have to move your son's body
No.
to close the door?
No.
He just slammed it shut.
Yes.
Okay. And you ran up the stairs.
Yes, sir.
You said you were going to go to your son.
Yes, sir.
Let's continue from that. What happened next?
I got to the top of the steps. Excuse me. When I rounded the railing, I looked down. I immediately, you know, I didn't see my fair share of that people, unfortunately. I knew he was gone. His eyes were just halfway open, and he was just completely limp. I didn't see his chest rising or nothing.
I don't know how much time I observed him because everything seemed to happen so fast. But, you know, I've been in those close combat shootouts scenarios. You have to triage people. And it's unfortunate. You know, when a father's got to triage his own son to save the rest of the family. But I remember looking down at him, and as I was looking down at him, you know, the defendant opened the door again. He screamed how he hated him. And I remember crouching down and putting my hands up. I'm like, and he was standing like in his door, and he kind of reached out and he kicked his leg, and he said, "Get him out of here." And I was just trying to reason with him, you know, by saying, "Okay, stop, go back inside." And he was standing there with his gun. You know, he didn't point it at me or anything. And then he just went into his apartment and shut the door. And I knew Trevor was gone. And then at that point, I ran in the apartment, Trevor's apartment. I remember grabbing the door with my left hand and slamming it behind me. And it was chaos in the house. Everybody was running and screaming.
So at this point, what is your main objective?
To let my son go and to save the rest of my family.
So you couldn't go over to the body, you needed to save the rest
No.
of the
No. There was no saving him.
So what do you do at this point?
I remember walking in the house. My niece was screaming. Everybody was just in a panic. And my brother-in-law Howard, I said, "I know you guys have a gun in the house. I need you to get it." And I tried to get everybody back because of that. In the close quarter combat scenario, when, you know, I've been trained for that stuff. There's no match. The gun that I had, you know, the 9mm that I had, there's no match with an AR. And
And by the gun that you had, you mean?
the one that Howard brought me,
Okay, so
Yep.
your son had a gun in his apartment.
he did, yes sir. So he brought me I think it was a 9mm silver handgun. Howard handed me the clip and the gun. And I remember looking at the magazine and feeling the weight. I could see that it had bullets in it. I put the magazine in and I racked it. And when I racked it, a round came out of the chamber and it landed in the middle of the living room floor. And I remember thinking, you know, do they realize that this gun was loaded? You know, I don't know if they thought it may have been unloaded, but or maybe they wanted to store it that way. I don't know. So like I said, in that type of scenario, you either want to face and fight the enemy, or you want to break contact with it. And I knew I did show some ill regard toward Madison. I thought he would come kicking the door, so I got everybody out to their back patio to egress. And my wife said, it's too high, we can't get out. So I said, everybody get into the back bedroom, you know, as far as we could away. I had everybody laying down. And
Did you direct them to do anything else at this time?
my family,
Yes.
to stay in that back bedroom and get down. And I think I may have told my niece or daughter to go get in the bathtub, you know, because that would offer some protection, because, you know, they had their own bathtub. Because those walls they're not any match for a high caliber round like that. And then my best defense was as close as I could be to the door. If he decided to kick it in, you know, the shortest barrel kind of wins, you know, because you have to, with an AR, you've got a big barrel to maneuver. With a 9mm, you know, you don't. So
you, considering that, everybody is in the back room, as safe as you can make them. Where did you go at this point?
So once everybody's in the back, I retreated to my son's bedroom because he had the window that you showed. Well, he's got that window right there that I could see through. So if there was any movement
going in front of that window, I would have stepped up to the door and engaged at that point, because it was maybe 3 steps away, from his bedroom door to that.
Did anybody end up walking in front of that window?
No, the only movement that was there, I think my brother-in-law, my sister-in-law's husband, I can't remember if he called me or I called him, because I knew he was outside. And I remember putting my phone down on speakerphone, because at this time, I was just in go mode at that point. I don't recall being scared or angry. I just know that
You trained
he's
me?
down. Yes, sir. We can't break contact. We have to fortify at this point. So I'm just kind of using the resources that I had. And then, my brother-in-law, they were outside so they could see, the door. And I said, okay. I said, let me know if you see his door open, because that would give me a few more seconds. Because if I see movement in front of that window and he kicked it in, that would be tight for me to engage. But, my brother-in-law, if he would have seen him coming out, I could have moved to that, the door closer, faster. And I just kept him on the phone. I said, let me know if you see any movement. And he was just giving me a constant feedback with what's going on. There's no movement. The cops are here. I think he said the medical folks were here. And I said, you tell me when people are coming up them steps, because, if somebody comes to that door, I'm going to shoot. So he's like, nope, there's police coming up. And I seen the movement, of the police officers, so I knew it was the police officers. I still had my gun aimed toward them. And then
Let's talk about this time. You were aware that somebody had called 911?
Yeah, and I think I may have even screamed, somebody call 911. Yeah.
And so your brother-in-law was taking presents out.
With
that's why they weren't inside. They
my
were-
sister-in-law, the two of them. Yes.
And you're waiting and he's there to kind of watch the door
Mm-hmm.
and to let you know when the police arrive.
Yes.
Was it a very long wait?
Seemed like eternity. I don't know. Maybe it'd be a guess, honestly. It seemed like it took forever, because I was just afraid he's gonna come in and shoot the place up.
Yeah. Okay, so you were directed by your brother-in-law that the police have arrived, so that you know not to shoot whoever's coming in front of the window.
Yes.
What did you do at this point?
I still held my position. I still kept everybody down. And I believe my brother-in-law said there's a SWAT team coming, which made sense. And somebody there that's used a gun, which still seemed like eternity. He told me the SWAT team was there. They're coming up the steps. I said, please confirm with them that they don't come into our apartment. He's like, no, they know exactly where they're going. And I could see them lining up outside the window. And I honestly expected maybe a shootout. So at that time I told my family, continue to lay flat on the ground. I too got down into a prone position. I still kept my gun, aimed toward the door, because these guys are going in on it's a nasty gun. An AR is a nasty gun. And I wasn't sure if they would need backup, so I just kept my gun charged on the door.
Did you follow your training?
I did. Then I think they kicked it in. You could hear all the commotion. And then when I knew, my brother-in-law said they had him in handcuffs. At that point, I got up. I ejected the magazine, ejected the round out of the chamber. I set them down on a little nightstand next to the front door. And I turned around and I grabbed my daughter and my wife into a huddle. And I told them that Trevor was gone. I did not tell them that he was gone already.
because I think they assumed he may have still been alive, and I didn't because they would have ran out there. I know they would have run out there, and that would have changed. That would have changed my whole posture. I would have had to have gone on the offense, and I would have probably had to enter his apartment or something. I don't know. I could not have them out there. And then the cops just took over the investigation from there. This is so senseless.
I'm very sorry. I do have a few more questions before I pass you over to the defense.
Yes, sir. I understand.
As far as your size goes in comparison to your son, how tall are you?
5'9",
And your son, how tall was he?
5'2", maybe, less shorter.
A lot smaller than you are?
Yes.
So in the photo that's in evidence of you two together, you weren't like standing on a platform or anything, that's your actual size comparison?
Yes, sir.
We talked a little bit about your son, what he was wearing, what he had with him when you went out. Is there any way, with what he was wearing, anyone would think he had a gun on? Did he have a gun on?
No, he had like I said, sweatpants, the dry fit shirt. I mean, it was tight. I mean, you would easily see if anybody had anything, on them, because it would really deform the shirt. And there's no way.
But you knew that he did own one.
He did, absolutely.
And
Yes.
you had your brother-in-law get it. Do you know where he got it from out of the apartment?
I don't. I thought he ran to the left, from the front door, which is his room. But I don't.
If you don't know,
I don't exactly recall.
when you came out of the door, you said the defendant was yelling as you were about to step out, following your son.
Yes.
How much of your son's body could you see? Sorry. How much of the defendant's body could you see at that point? The doors are both open.
When he was initially yelling,
Yes.
it was basically only his head, like maybe his chest up, because the door was an open end to the left for him, like he was just kind of doing this number, peeking out. So not his whole body, but I only recall, probably seeing his upper section and his head. I just remember the purple face of anger. That's all I really focused on. I didn't focus
Did you
anything
just
else.
see his face?
Yeah, I 100% seen his face. Yes, sir.
And so was he leaning around his door? So you didn't see the rest of his body? Is the door blocking the rest of the body?
That I recall, yes. During all of the screaming, yes.
So you wouldn't have seen anything he was holding at that time?
No, sir.
The state will pass the witness.
Defense?
Yes, Your Honor, may I proceed?
Yes.
Mr. Bean, my name is Jason Goss. I'm one of the attorneys that represents Mason, and I understand how hard. I can't, but I can imagine how hard it is for you. No matter how or what was the cause of losing your son, having that happen in front of you, I'm sure it's traumatic. And so, I say that second. I have to ask you questions.
I understand, sir.
And I'm sorry about it. I don't mean to offend you.
No,
There may be hard questions about your
Yes,
son.
sir.
There may be hard questions about some of the things that happened. And I'd just like you to understand that up front.
I do.
So first, I kind of want to get an idea about, with the prosecution. So we've seen some exhibits and some other things. Could you give a roundabout over 3 years, how many times you've met with the DA's office, with the lawyers for the DA's office?
So once, like over a Zoom call, that was quite a while ago. And then last week was the first time I recall ever like sitting down face to face with them.
Sure, and I mean, I'll make it clear, there's nothing wrong with doing that, it's pretty normal to talk to your witnesses, but, as far as, like, for instance, you know that we started the trial today, did you talk to anybody, because you weren't in the courtroom for opening statement, did you talk to anybody about my opening statement, or did they say anything to you about it?
No, sir.
Okay. Well, I'd like to go over memory a little bit. Obviously, you have been, and you talked about some of your training. You would agree that some of your training has to do with not only being able to act in the moment, but also to describe what happened in the immediate aftermath to superiors or to anybody else who needs that information.
Sure.
Right?
Yes, sir.
So you've been trained in a kind of a heightened level of observation, but also to remember those details, to give it to the people who need it, to explain what happened in the immediate aftermath of something like this.
Sure. Yes, sir.
Okay. And the reason I say this is because you would also agree that your memory on all of this was fresher the day it happened than it is 3 years later. Right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and sometimes the questions I'm asking, it may sound like statements, but I'm putting a question mark.
Okay.
Just, I don't know, that's probably my fault, but I'm sorry. But yeah, so whatever happens, like at the moment, and then you're describing it, you would expect that you're remembering those details better then than 3 years later.
I don't. Maybe I don't know. It depends. I guess to me, I think it depends on how traumatic it was for you. You know, because your mind does try to connect the dots. Yes.
Well, I some things, kind of like you said, can be, I guess, burned in your memory, and you can still remember it well, but you're still remembering it as well as you did when it happened.
Yes.
You agree with that?
Yes, sir.
And really what I'm trying to get to is that your memory doesn't usually get better with age. For human beings, it gets worse.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And somebody like you, especially who has been trained specifically to, in the immediate aftermath, to be able to calmly and precisely relay your observations about what happened. Right?
As best as you can, like I said, depending on the traumatic event. Yes.
And so as we go through that, you talked to a detective Henning that day. You went down to the station and you spoke to him about everything that you saw and everything.
Yes, sir.
I want to talk about Christmas because one of the things that you told the jury, and one of the things that you mentioned is that this was the first time you had ever been to Trevor and Howard's apartment.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
The first time for your wife, the first time for your other family.
All of us that went there that day. Yes.
And that's because Trevor's apartment is relatively small
It is small. It was small.
compared to the house that you had in the front.
Sure. Yes.
I mean, we don't have to go too far into it, but I mean, about how big house
It's
And-
4.
and living areas and everything else. So would you say it's 2 or 3 times the size of the apartment or more?
Sure.
And the only reason I ask that is because I think you also said that this was the first time ever that Trevor had not gone to where you are for Christmas, or where your family is.
Yeah, it's always. Yeah, from what I recall, it's always at our house.
And which I think makes sense. Your house can accommodate your family, you guys are comfortable there, Trevor's comfortable there. It's one of those things. Normally every year that's what would happen.
Yes.
So, and my point being, if somebody, so the expectation, if every year that's what happens, the expectation is that year Trevor would be with you rather than you guys all come and try to cram into that apartment.
Yes.
Right? But this year, because y'all have made that, Trevor said I want to host or whatever, y'all made the decision, to all go to that apartment,
Mhm.
right? And
Yes.
so that's why everybody was there on Christmas Day.
Correct.
You know, you talked about it in the photo, you said, I guess, you said that was Trevor's enlistment in the Army.
Correct.
Was Trevor, did he end up being discharged from the Army?
No, he was still in the Army up until the day he was shot.
Okay, and so he was in regular Army, no?
Guards. He was a guardsman. Guard.
Okay, understood. And you know, as far as going back to Christmas, you talked about the fact you guys arrived about 9 o'clock. What time about would you say that Trevor starts bringing the dog out and you start walking out?
I would say maybe around 11.
11.
And that is honestly a rough guess. I really don't recall the exact time.
And when you, the reason, well, I guess first the dog had to go out, and I think you guys all told Maddie to take the dog out, or wanted Maddie to take the dog out, but she wouldn't wake up. You remember
No.
that?
No, she was up.
Okay.
No,
So you don't remember saying, you don't remember ever telling the police officer that she was asleep and?
No, they were asleep when we first arrived.
Okay.
Because we were acting a fool because the door was locked and we were trying, hey, come on, get up. But yeah, she was slow getting up. She may have still been asleep, but I don't recall them trying to get her up out of bed to take the dog out, I guess is what I'm saying.
Sure. I mean, but with something like that, if you had said it before, that would be, your memory would have been fresher about that than it is 3 years later.
Yeah, and yeah, I think she still was asleep. She was the tough one to get up that morning.
Right. And as far as Trevor, so I ask this because you may or may not know, but do you know now that Trevor was high on cocaine at the time that all this happened?
No,
Did you know that he was a cocaine user?
no.
Did you see any signs or evidence of that use that morning?
No, I have never, because he would know I would come unglued,
Well, sure, I imagine.
you know.
So I guess, is it safe to say that there are parts and aspects of Trevor that you did not know about?
I definitely didn't know about that.
Right. And I don't mean that to disrespect you. That came out with the autopsy and everything else. So I'm not just saying something to say it, just so that you understand that. And I wouldn't try to disrespect you with it. But additionally, he was intoxicated almost to the legal limit, the driver. So it's like a .067. Did you, were you guys drinking that morning, or did you see Trevor drinking?
No, because he was still, they were all still asleep when we got there. I didn't see him drinking anything, no, sir.
Okay. So between the hours of I guess 9 and maybe 11 something when you're walking the dog, were you always around Trevor? Did you always see everything he was doing?
Yeah, well, not every second. I mean, we're all in the common area because it's all kind of an open concept. But to my knowledge, I mean, he was either eating or sitting on a couch and opening gifts. So
So I guess if that is a surprise to you, though, then you wouldn't have been factoring that into the way that Trevor was reacting to Mason, the fact that he was on cocaine at the time.
no,
Okay. Did it change how you feel about that scenario?
no. Regardless if somebody was intoxicated or drunk, they don't deserve to be shot like that. Is that what you're asking me? Did he deserve to be shot
No, so
because he was high?
No,
I'm sorry then.
No, let me ask you, and I can understand if I gave you offense with that, that's not what I mean. What I mean is that sometimes you would agree that if somebody's on cocaine or they're intoxicated, that it can change their behavior, make them more aggressive.
not a medical pro at cocaine. You know, I'm sure it affects everybody differently.
Yeah, I understand
You know.
that, and I guess, but you may not be a medical pro, but you are at a point where it would infuriate you to know that he was on it.
I would be extremely upset. I will not deny that at all.
Because of what's due to people, and you would not want your son or anybody to have a drug like that in their system, because of what it
Or
does.
any drug.
Sure. I didn't mean any offense. No, look, nobody's saying
Yeah,
your son
no.
deserves to die.
I understand that.
Okay. So, but you can agree that your son's actions that you witnessed, that those are important for us to, when we're making this determination. What
Sure.
your son did on the day that this happened. You can agree with that.
Yeah, high on whatever or not, I think he'd have done the same thing, you know, because he was protecting me. That's probably how he's seen it. So
Well-
regardless of what was in his system, I can't say that because he had cocaine in his system, that's why he walked up there, or if he didn't have cocaine in his system, if he wouldn't have walked up there. Because I think he would have, you know, regardless.
And you said to protect you.
Well, because he focused his attention on me, and you know, and then once he did that, I think that's probably what angered Trevor.
Well, this is one, okay, and it could have been, but this is one of the things I want to talk about a little bit about this. Is that you remember you talked to a detective same day, and it was recorded, right? Have you seen that recording?
I believe so. Yes. Is it the one where I'm in the apartment
No, the one where you're in the interview room.
interview?
Have you seen that recording?
Yes.
Okay. So you know in that recording, you know that never once do you tell that detective that he said anything directly to Trevor, that he only directed it at you.
I don't recall that because he started yelling before he even seen me, and
Well, that's what you said,
Yeah.
but when you watched that prior recording, you actually said that he started yelling after you came out of the apartment and Trevor was halfway down the stairs. You don't remember that?
I don't recall that in the
If
city.
you were able, because we can go like and kind of go back and forth, but one of the things I'd probably like to do is just, will you agree with me that you'll go back and watch that statement that you gave 3 years ago, and then I'll call you back up here when it comes time for our case in chief, and we'll talk about some of those things that you said. Okay, but I want to ask you some of the other things because when you talked to the detective, the only thing you told the detective at the time that Mason said was, your son ruined my life, and when you got robbed, it was him that did it. Okay? Now, today, you've come in and you've said that he was directing ill regard towards Madison, but you never said that before to a detective.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
probably, yeah.
Is it because you've talked to family members and Howie and other people about this, and that has perhaps changed your recollection about what you believe happened?
No, sir, I haven't seen Madison since Trevor's funeral. How we left, you know, I haven't just, you know, their conversations with them hasn't persuaded. I know what I heard that day.
Yeah.
You know, I know it was, because I remember it in the 3 phases, you know, how he effing hates Trevor, with regard to Madison, and then to me. That's how it's ingrained in that's how I recall it that day.
That's right, and I understand that's how you testified to it, but back when you originally talked to detectives, this was right after it happened, right?
Sure.
And that your memory about what was said at the time surely would have been better than it is today.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I probably didn't capture everything. You know, it's different when your son's the one that went down in front of you than some other person you're reporting on.
I understand it, for sure. But you know, some of the things that you testified to here now, the reason it's important that it's different is it keeps kind of sliding it to a little bit more Mason and a little bit less your son in the murder trial. You see how those statements that you're saying now are different, and it's a little bit more as if you were trying to block any self-defense claim.
I just,
Your Honor, sidebar.
So,
I'm sorry, I don't see that.
Okay.
Because I'm just conveying what I recall, or not. I'm gonna swear in the good book, and you're gonna get what I recall.
I understand. I mean, one of the things though is Your Honor, may I approach this?
Yes.
Demonstrative. One of the things is that today you testified that your view was obstructed about what Trevor was doing as he was going in.
When he was reaching to the door, correct?
Yeah, your view of through the grate or whatever. And I guess my question is that because when you talked to the detective, you said you could clearly see Trevor open the door. Do you remember doing that?
I don't, and I remember it being obstructed, but I think I had it in my head that he did open the door, although I didn't physically see him grab the door handle and turn it and open it. I don't recall that, but it was illogical to me as my mind's trying to put this thing together that he did open the door.
Well, I understand, but specifically you said the door was obviously shut by the time Trevor got to the steps, went to his apartment, turned his doorknob and pushed it open. That's what you said to the detective.
Yeah,
And I think he may have stepped in the door frame.
and that 100% no, he did not step inside.
Okay. But you see what I mean? Like,
Sure.
right after this happens, you're telling the detective, even though it hurts Trevor, you're saying,
Mhm.
I saw him go up, open the door, and step in the door frame.
Yeah, he stepped toward it.
Objection, Your Honor, improper impeachment.
I'll
I mean, that's what you're saying to the detective right after it happened. Right? Because you watched it, so you know that that's what you said.
Yeah, I do know he took another step towards it, but he didn't step inside. Because I do know he did take another step toward the door, but he did not enter the door
Well,
frame.
do you remember when you're talking to the detective the day that this happened? Saying that's what bugs me. If somebody comes in your house and threatens you, what you're saying is he's within his rights to shoot that person.
Yeah, I don't know the whole castle law, but if somebody physically, comes in your house and charges you or is going to kill you, absolutely, I think you're within your rights.
Well, and I guess, and I'm not, because the judge will give the jury the law, and I'm not really asking about the law, I'm saying that statement, telling a detective that the day that it happens, if somebody comes in your house and threatens you, the guy's probably within his rights. That statement includes somebody coming into your house. You agree with that?
To an extent, sure.
And that's not a statement that you would make if you're positive 100% sure he never went into the house.
Yeah, and I am totally positive he did not enter that house.
Then do you see what I mean? How that you would tell the detective like that? It bugs me because the guy's within his rights to shoot somebody if they go into the house and threaten them.
Mm-hmm.
You see how that
Sure.
and so I can understand the father coming to testify at the trial 3 years later. It's a little different. But you would agree with me that telling the detective that on the day it happened is more consistent with what you actually saw. Would you agree with that?
To an extent, I would.
And so when you said that you felt like it looked like he stepped into the door frame, and then, it bugs me because the guy's within his rights if somebody goes in his house and threatens him. Those are things on that day that you obviously realize it's not good for.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
overruled.
That you realize isn't good for Trevor's position in this whole thing.
Right.
Because, going back to, you talked about, they were asking about your son's temperament. You said he's a jokester, he was a happy kid. But he was also diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
You said, is that?
Yeah, yes.
An oppositional defiance disorder is very difficult for parents because it means the child is angry, upset.
Now, I guess you say when he was diagnosed, he was, to my knowledge, no doctor ever diagnosed him with that.
If then the family believed that that's what he suffered from.
Maybe. I still don't agree with that.
Who does agree with it?
Who doesn't agree?
Who does? Because somebody.
Well, my wife, she's always the medical MD, and when she Googles something, well, maybe he's got
Objection,
that.
Your Honor, relevance.
They asked about his temperament.
Overruled.
Yeah, he's never been diagnosed with ADHD, all the A's and the D's or this.
Well, and I mean, oppositional defiance disorder in particular, though, which you might believe that he had, is, it is, one of the hallmarks of that is that the person does not follow norms, rules, and laws.
Objection, Your Honor.
What's your objection?
He's testifying on the expertise.
Okay, just get into a question, that's fine.
That's what that is, right?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, I thought you said it was fine.
I said to get into a question, you can say right, if it's an answer, if he knows.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know the definition of that diagnosis.
And this is what I mean, I don't wanna make you uncomfortable, but I need to talk about these things, cause they touched on it first. So just on the obstructed view, this is one of those things that, like I said, to cause you any more issues, but I think it's probably better if you are able to review it again, but the entire time you talked to the detective, you never told the detective you had an obstructed view.
Yeah, because I had it in my mind, because it made sense to me that when he reached the knock, that he opened the door. I was, convinced at that because his hand, was reaching out that way, and it just made logical sense to me.
Well, and it kind of goes to the knock, like, you never told the detective that that in your mind, he was even reaching out to knock. You were clear to the detective that he went up there and he opened the door, and then he screamed, "I'm gonna slap the shit out of you," when he opened the door and went in. That's kind of that's what you said to the detective at the time.
Objection, Your Honor. He's using the question to testify of evidence that's not.
It's a cross.
Okay, just, can you continue to ask a question?
I mean, I guess that's what I'm saying, you didn't say that, like, my son was reaching out to knock on the door. You said before, what you said was that he reached out, opened the door, and started walking in, while saying, "I'm gonna slap the shit out of you." Do you remember seeing yourself say that to the detective on that day?
Yeah, I guess I don't recall that. If I said it, I probably said it. I just don't, obviously the clarity of it, I can't capture everything in a however long interview, unfortunately, and, we
And
could
just
just
to be clear,
nitpick it,
Just to be clear, I don't expect you to, and I'm not here to play like gotcha with you or whatever, but I really want, it's important that the jury understands that what you testified to or here on the stand today was either different than what you said before, or there's a lot more details than what you have.
Sure.
Okay? So, I think at one point, so you hear the shots, and Your Honor, may I get up and move towards the area of the defendant for demonstration? I'm sorry, the witness for the demonstration.
That's fine.
And I don't like these. One of the things, have you dealt with an AR before? Have you held one, trained with one, shot one?
I don't recall ever shooting an AR.
Okay, what about a similar type of rifle?
M4.
Okay, that's a fully automatic with the military grade.
It can, yes.
Okay. So would you say just kind of in length and general dimensions, the M4 and the AR-15 or so?
M4 is much shorter.
M4 is much shorter.
Yeah, it's more condensed.
So an AR-15 would be longer as a rifle.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Would that be barrel longer? And I'm just asking because you know more than I do about the difference between them. But would that be barrel longer or like stock longer, or do you know?
No, I would say the M4 barrel's shorter, and the stock is much shorter on an M4 because it's designed for close combat.
In firing an M4 with a short barrel, if you were to fire it, do you know that like gunpowder and smoke and soot and stuff comes out of the end of the barrel?
Sure.
And the same would be with an AR-15.
I would imagine so.
And if somebody is standing over another person and firing a rifle, any rifle, the distance between the barrel and the person on the ground is not very far.
Objection, Your Honor.
Is your objection?
Sorry, I withdraw that objection.
Okay.
Go ahead.
The distance between the barrel and the person on the ground would not be very far. You would agree with that?
Sure.
And you also know that, that when a bullet is fired, it fires gunpowder and soot into whatever you're firing.
Yes.
And forgive me, I know that's hard because I'm demonstrating something that has personal things to you, but, or personal meaning to you. But when you testified that you heard shot, 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 and then you saw that Mason came and opened the door, and you said he stood over your son, and he shot 2 more times into your son while he was on the ground.
No, he didn't. The way you said it didn't make sense to me. He never opened the door and then shot again. No, the door was still open from the first 3 shots.
Okay.
So if I had said that, I completely botched
No.
that up.
That may have been me, because you may have never said that he shut the door and opened it up again. Whether the door was open or didn't open, what your testimony is that he was standing over your son and shot 2 more times.
I would say not directly over him. You know, I could see him in the foyer, but by the time he was done shooting, he was standing over him. You know what I'm saying?
Like moving in.
Correct. Not like standing directly over the top of him.
Okay, so he wasn't doing like an execution shot directly over the top.
No, he was back a little farther, but no, not standing directly over like.
And then boom, boom, and then coming in. And again, I'm sorry to act this out,
I
all
know.
that stuff, but that's how you would describe that.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. And so, do you remember him saying, because I don't think you testified to it on direct, but you said it to the detective before, that Mason, one of the things when so now this has happened, you're obviously very afraid for your family here, for your son here, and what's going on here. Does that make sense? But do you remember Mason at some point telling you, get him the fuck away from me?
Yes.
Okay. Now, that implies that Mason still believes that he could be a threat.
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
Can answer if he knows.
I don't know why I would think that he was.
Well, I guess if Mason believed that he was dead, then he doesn't need you to get him away from him, I guess, to get him away from his house.
I don't know what he was thinking.
And that's fair. I'll take that answer. So, as far as Trevor's gun, did you know him to carry it frequently?
No, I knew he had one. He did bring that gun out to the house before.
And he asked, so he brought it out to the house, and y'all have like a shooting range out there, or like something that you shoot like cannons or something?
No shooting range.
So when he brought it out, how did he bring it? Like, how did he transport it?
It was in his vehicle.
Okay. Did he take it out of his vehicle and take it? into the
It wasn't
house?
like he never carried. I never seen him physically carry it on him like a open carry or something.
Right.
No, it was always in the vehicles out stored.
It just, I know it's lawyers and semantics, and it's not to irritate me, but the first time you kind of said it, you said that he took it out to the house. Did you mean he took it in his vehicle and had the vehicle out of the house?
To my house, yes.
Okay, but he didn't take it from the vehicle inside the house, or did he?
No, he brought it inside to show me.
Okay, so he brought it inside the show. Do you remember in relation to Christmas Day 2021, do you remember when that was that he did that?
I do not know because he was always at the house, so I don't. It's hard to tell.
And so when you said open carry, for maybe some of the jurors who aren't familiar, the law is that you can't open carry. You can put it on a holster as long as you're not forbidden from carrying, like a holster on the hip kind of thing. Right?
That's my understanding of it.
And then concealed carry may be like, in the pants or a hidden holster or holster around back,
Sure.
a little shoulder holster or something
Sure.
that's covered, right? Because that's what you would consider the difference.
That's how I interpret it. Yeah.
So when he walked the gun in, how did he walk it in? Is kind of my question.
No, he had it in a box.
Okay. And had he just bought it when you brought it up?
I don't recall.
So, I want to go through immediately after the shooting happened. upstairs and you went left, right? And you went into the apartment, to Trevor's apartment, eventually, right?
Eventually, yeah, yes.
And you said, I guess you told Howie or something, get the gun, because you knew Trevor had a gun somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Get the gun. Now, you said something about, I was anticipating him coming to Madison because of the ill regard.
Right.
Whatever that you said you'd shown for it. But when you talked about this before with the detective, you never said that you thought that he was gonna come after Madison or anything about really Madison at all as far as his ill regard.
Objection, Your Honor, House to answer.
It's just a little different.
Okay, just go ahead.
So, and I guess the issue is that even though anytime something like this happens, you being able to protect your family, you were afraid of Mason coming over there is what you said, right?
Yes.
But he didn't come over there, did he?
No, sir.
And in fact, you didn't know this, but at the time, he was in there on the phone with 911 himself, saying that he had killed Trevor.
Mm-hmm.
But you didn't know that at the time.
No, sir.
Because you were rightfully so, you were gonna be in a position to protect your family, right?
Yes.
And you were gonna shoot anything that came in that door.
Well, to an extent, yeah.
Right. That felt like a threat to you or your family.
Yeah, after knowing what happened, yes.
Right, and how far would you let anybody get in that door before you act?
Well, I don't know if I would let them in the door.
Right, but if they did, the door open, do they have to go all the way in for you to act if you feel like they're a threat?
That's really a scenario you don't know.
I
You don't.
mean, the law knows though, which is that you don't have to wait to be a victim or your family doesn't either. And I think your quote was, if someone comes through that door, I'm gonna shoot. That's what you said on direct examination,
Mhm.
right? Now, obviously, you have just witnessed and experienced something that caused you to believe that there is a potential threat. You would agree with that?
I felt there was but I thought there was a definite threat because the shooting
Absolutely.
already happened.
And it turned out though, that the only person that Mason shot, or the only person he tried to, was the person that came into his house and threatened him.
I don't.
Right?
I still disagree with the coming into the house part, but yes.
But by disagreeing with the coming into the house, you agree that you're disagreeing with yourself 3 years ago talking to the detective.
Objection, Your Honor, improper impeachment.
Just make it a question.
Well, so, and that's okay. Just to make it clear though, if you're disagreeing with that statement I made, I'm making that statement based on your witness interview to the detective 3 years ago, where you said he did.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper
Isn't that correct?
So ruled.
Isn't that correct?
You have to repeat it because we.
Well, I said the only person that Mason shot that day is the person that came into his home and threatened him. And you said,
Objection, Your Honor, that one was asked and answered.
well, he asked me to rephrase
I'll let
this
you finish the
question.
question.
And then you said, I don't agree with that statement. And then I said, if you do not agree,
Objection, Your Honor, improper impeachment.
I'm now asking the question again.
Go ahead.
And I said, if you do not agree with that statement, then you are not agreeing with what you said to the detective 3 years ago when you told the
Objection
detective.
is using his question.
Judge, I get the state doesn't like me asking this question, but I'm trying to get it out first before.
That's fine. So ruled.
I'm still not following your. I'm sorry. I'm just not following your question.
Okay, I'll ask it a different way, because I could be asking it in the way. You watched your interview with the detective. What did you go over it? I've told you, or I'm just repeating what you said.
Objection, Your Honor. I use the question to testify.
Let's let him ask the question first.
The door was obviously shut by the time Trevor got up the steps. He went to his apartment, Trevor turned his doorknob, pushed it open, and I think he may have stepped in the doorframe. that is, I want to make it clear that you will accept,
Objection,
you
Your
said
Honor,
that.
improper impeachment.
if
That's
I,
what you said.
yeah, if I said it, then I won't deny that I said that.
And I would never put that to you if that's not what I'm reading from the
Sure.
transcript here, what you're saying. So you agree that is a statement that he went into the door frame, or, to be fair, that he may have stepped in the door frame?
I had the perfect view of him, you know, his upper body. I don't think he stepped in. I'm positive he didn't step into the door. That's just how I recall it.
I understand, but the perfect view that you're talking about, and this is where when we started this examination I wanted to get to, Your Honor, may I propose this? So it's kind of like, you're saying you had a perfect view when you're saying that he didn't go into the apartment, but you had an obstructed view when you're saying you don't know if he's the one that opened the door or not. So your view gets perfect and obstructed based on how it helps or hurts a self-defense claim. Does that make sense that that's what it sounds like you're saying?
Well, when it comes to opening the door, you're talking a small portion, you know, that I just don't recall him physically grabbing it and opening the door. But as a whole person, I know he did not cross into that door. And as God is my witness, that'll be my testimony to my last dying breath, regardless of what I've said in an interview or how it's interpreted. Sorry.
And just so to go back to that, but when you were describing to this detective, you told him, that's what bugs me. The guy is in his rights if somebody comes in your house and threatens you.
Mm-hmm.
And you understand and you know you made that statement.
Sure. And I don't think there's anything wrong with making that statement.
Well, obviously I do not think it's wrong. I think you're 100% correct, right? So I think it's correct. And I think that it's right. But what I'm asking about is that if that's not what you saw happening that day, when your son was shot in front of you, if you didn't see that happening, you wouldn't lie to hurt your son to the detective, right? You wouldn't say something to the detective that wasn't true that would hurt your son, right?
I will not lie.
And I understand it. But, so when you say,
Objection, Your Honor, may we approach?
What's your objection? No, what's your objection?
oh, sorry.
Okay, I'll deny, but move on because we kind of asked this one already.
I understand. And I'm only breaking it down to go back to the question that I had, which is the only person that Mason shot is the person that went into his home and threatened him.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
He asked me to
I'll sustain it.
So you were concerned and you set up, you did not know that Mason was on the phone with 911 when you guys were on the phone with 911,
Yes, sir.
right? That is something that you would do, somebody would do if they were just in an incident or a traumatic incident where they had to use deadly force, is call 911, right?
Sure. Yes.
Right. There was never at any time, and Mason had opportunity, there was never at any time when he brought a gun barrel up and pointed it at you.
No, sir. He didn't. He never pointed at me.
There was never a time that he threatened you with it.
No, sir.
And before Trevor went up the steps and went to his door and opened his door and said, I'm going to slap the shit out of you, Mason never threatened Trevor with his gun. That you know,
Not that I've seen. No, sir.
or that you witnessed.
No.
Mason could have easily come out and got with that gun on that step at that door. He could have walked out the door and shot him right there. Right?
Sure. Yes.
But he didn't. He didn't do that.
Mm-hmm.
You agree with that?
I agree.
In the did any of saying is that at the time that Mason is yelling, which you say to the detective is, your son ruined my life. To the time he gets, Trevor's down here, and you're halfway down before Trevor starts to move back up.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so he starts to move back up at what you say is, he starts to move back up at what you say is, the time you got robbed, your son was the one that robbed you.
Correct. Like all the times that you were robbed.
All the times you were robbed.
Something of that nature, yes.
Okay. But he didn't tell you, like, Trevor didn't tell you, like, you know what, Dad, that's the last straw, I'm going up there. I'm gonna.
Trevor didn't say anything to me.
He just turned back up and went to here, and you kind of continued down the stairs here.
Unfortunately, yes.
And when you heard him say, I'm going to slap the shit out of you, or you want to get slapped again, or whatever else, when you heard him say that, it was only then that you heard gunshots.
About five-ish seconds after that, yes.
So he's standing at the doorway with the door open.
Mhm.
As he's opened it, and you said 5 seconds or so.
About that.
Okay.
It was pretty fast, about 5 to 10 seconds.
I mean, 5 to 10 seconds, right? And so 5 to 10 seconds, you would agree, if somebody has opened a person's door and is standing in the hallway or standing in the doorway even, or has a foot almost in or whatever else, 5 to 10 seconds is a long time to contemplate what kind of threat this person is, right?
I would say 5 to 10 seconds is plenty of time to assess
Sure.
a threat.
And it would be plenty of time to go get a gun and then meet the person that's coming into your home. Definitely does not imply, or does 5 to 10 seconds does not imply the person has the gun already there.
I don't know if he had the gun though.
Well, and the reason I'm asking that is because you didn't hear Trevor say like, whoa, 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 what are you doing with the gun or whatever.
You know, and that's funny you bring that up, because that's always haunted me, is why, you know, he never defended himself, you know, because the natural reaction is, you know, get in a defensive position, put your right foot behind your left and twist your body and put your hands up, and there was never that.
Right, because if you're going in on offense and somebody turns around with defense, you may not even expect that, right? And that could be.
Well, correct, but he wasn't going in. I mean, he was clearly standing right there at the door.
You were aware that Trevor had slapped Mason before. You knew about that.
Not after the fact that I did. I didn't know that. I mean, I knew you're not the one that telling me. I mean, I discovered that well after the fact.
Yeah, I think you said it to the detectives.
Yeah.
Somebody told you that day, or.
Yeah, because I didn't know it before the incident.
Okay, but were you aware of why Trevor slapped Mason?
I thought it was because he was hitting on Madison. I don't know the exact circumstances of it.
Okay. Did you know that in fact it was because Mason had called the police because Trevor had been hurting guys?
I don't know anything about that.
Okay. Judge, I'll pass it.
Stay.
So on cross, specifically, you had no knowledge of your son's drug use, correct?
That cocaine, no, that's
That's the first time you ever heard of it.
that's a shock to me.
But when you arrived, you did say that he had to come open the door to let you in.
Trevor did. Well, Howie's the one when we first arrived for the
Yeah,
day.
when you first arrived.
Yeah, Howie was the one that opened the door and let us in.
But then you were in with Howie and the family, correct?
Correct.
During that time, did you ever see your son do any drugs?
No, and he would. I know he would never do it in my presence if he was doing it. Obviously he was, but
Why wouldn't he do that?
because he know I would come unglued.
Why is it obvious that he was? Okay, with what you just said, why is it obvious he was?
Because I forget his name, because he told me the autopsy report said that was in his system. The cocaine was in his system, so
because
obviously
of that, you just believe the defense counsel?
I do.
Well, it's also just true.
Well-
I have the report, maybe too.
I guess I don't know.
They make a legal objection to it.
I guess we can also do that. We all agree it's true. It's true. Thank you.
You haven't seen any sort of autopsy report, have you?
No, sir.
Okay. And he wasn't acting like you thought he was on drugs?
No, he wasn't acting out of the ordinary. I mean, I would never, and I suspect that stuff as a guy that's, I take pride in this. I have never even smoked a joint in my entire life. I've done 0 drugs. And I would not have suspected that 1 second. I'm floored.
Okay, but
To hear this.
you don't have any knowledge of that. You didn't, this is the first time you heard of it, correct?
Yes, sir.
Alright. So that morning, was your son's behavior as you guys arrived there erratic?
No. He was perfectly normal to me.
Was it aggressive?
No. No, sir.
So he wasn't acting out in any way in the morning?
No, sir. It was his joking, normal way. It was a normal morning.
And you said he wouldn't have done drugs because you were there?
Correct. He
And
would
you
never.
didn't-
He would never do it in my presence.
In your presence, okay. So you didn't see him do drugs?
No, sir.
You didn't see him acting erratic?
No, sir.
You didn't see him being aggressive before the incident with it?
No, sir.
Okay. All right, so moving on to one of the other points about your statement. That statement's not in evidence right now, correct?
Which statement? I'm
The
sorry.
one that the defense kept reading from it, is that in, that hasn't been entered in that evidence?
Defense will offer that statement at this time.
Any green offer?
Yeah, we would love to put the video.
Okay.
The video?
Yeah, it's a video. I don't have it on this, but we'll offer it. So, the jury.
Let me get a 10-minute break.
All rise for the jury. Thank you. May be seated.
What are you trying to put in his other statement, or they're trying to put in?
I have it already. There's a lot of dead space where I have it on. These things about 20 minutes. We don't need to play.
What are y'all trying to, he's already crossed the line, you've already asked questions, but what
We would like to play it with him on this.
I'm not gonna waste any time on that. Y'all admit it, we'll admit it, and just, he's already asked a lot of
Well,
questions.
but Judge, if it's important that the witness has the opportunity to explain what he's saying, what he's thinking when he's saying these things.